Good morning, everyone. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I am thrilled today to have Iuliia. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah, absolutely, Rudy. Thank you.
Mendel, who is the former press secretary to Vladimir Zelenskyy, who has, and by the way, I have to let all my participants in.
Hi, Rudy. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. We've got a number of participants here on Zoom, and we're actually going on to LinkedIn Live and YouTube Live. Thank you again. And before we get into it, just tell us what's happening. You just came in with some great news that you're really happy about. Tell us what's happened that just recently.
Yeah, I'm very emotional right now. I've been crying like for an hour. So right now, Ukrainian army is moving in my home region, in the southern region of Kherson. I'm from there originally, and just an hour ago, Ukrainian army has established a Ukrainian flag in the village where my aunt and uncle live, and they've been under Russian occupation for over 8 months, since March. And for me, it was very emotional. I've got her call. She was telling how it was happening. It's 24 miles before Kherson. So we expect that Ukrainian army enters Kherson very, very soon, and we will see what's going to happen. But this is the moment that I personally have been waiting for months, millions of minutes and seconds and hours, and praying and learning the news and fearing, and now it's happening that Ukraine is liberating my home region.
It's got to be an incredible feeling. It's got to be an incredible feeling, yes. Especially when Putin thought that he could just walk all over the Ukrainians. They would put down their arms and there will be, fear in the hearts of the Ukraine. Well, I have a lot of opinions about Putin, but either his generals were not telling him the truth, or he's delusional, or he's such a megalomaniac that how can anybody oppose him? I think he and probably most people in the world underestimated the resolve of the Ukrainian people.
Yes, you're right. He was very overestimated because his propaganda, Putin's propaganda, was working very well. Like, he had this very well developed image of a strong leader, strong person. And that's why everybody thought that, he will be much stronger. On the other hand, we were the nation that always was just one more post-Soviet nation near Moscow, so everybody was underestimating Ukrainians. But now look, Russians retreated from Kiev, they retreated from Kharkiv, and now they are retreating from Kherson. So this is already the system. It's not like something that happened. You cannot cover this with like goodwill gesture, as they were trying to pretend. They simply cannot fight the Ukrainian army. And that's exactly why they're sending missiles and kamikaze drones to civilian infrastructure and to the cities and to the children's playgrounds, because they try us to, get scared because they cannot fight Ukrainian army on the ground. So you're right, we were underestimated, he was overestimated, but I guess that corruption became the part of Russian identity, and that was one of the many reasons why they failed. Also, they were not motivated, and we are very much motivated to stay independent, not to be under Russia, and build our future as a part of free world.
Well, it's amazing how strong the cry for democracy is. And how most people don't really care who governs them. And I say that rather tongue in cheek. They just want to be free. They want to be able to do things. They want to have food. They want to have a job. They want security. But when a tyrant comes in, it's amazing the motivation that people have to say, no, you are not going to conquer me,
Rudy, I would say that democracy is often criticized, but it's not perfect. On the other hand, democracy is not given by the default. It's something that we need to cherish every day, and sometimes we need to fight for it. I think my people. I'm not saying only army, because there are a lot of volunteers, just tattoo masters and cooks, and agrarians who fight there. My people show to the world that democracy is the value, and that this is the value that we can die for. So I really, right now we are passing such an important moment, transformational moment, which provides us a lot of happiness. Because when Russians started this attack back in February, everything was collapsing around us, and we never knew if tomorrow will ever come. And now we know that we are strong enough, and we have the world standing for us, they're standing with us shoulder to shoulder, actually. And we know that we have this strength to fight one of the biggest, largest armies in the world.
Well, and I think we're in a situation where there's a lot of smoke and mirrors from Russia. For the longest time, I thought, I was a political science major many years ago at the time of the dinosaurs when I was in college, and I always thought, why are we so afraid of the communists? Why are we so afraid of the Cold War? Because eventually they'll fall on their own, for the very same reason we discussed. People want to be free. They don't want a government to tell them what to do every minute of the day. And that's, I think, Russia, or Putin, sees this grand scheme of a great Russia. But what we've learned is he's even underestimated his people. His military resources are not as strong as everyone thought they were. A lot of old tanks that didn't work well in the Ukraine. And I think the Ukrainians have the advantage of stealth, getting in and out, and almost say the home court advantage, their terrain. I think I'm not a military strategist, but my thing is they were probably very little in the way of preparation going into this. And the Russians have had to come back and say, wait a minute, we're going to do something, we're going to win, but they keep getting these setbacks, right? They just keep getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. I think of, there's
Rudy, you were saying...
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Leah, go ahead.
You're saying very smart things, that we here in Ukraine understand very well, because we have the border with Russia, right? But you see this from another country very well, and I'm very grateful for this. Let me say that Putin had his political puppets here, some politicians who were pro-Russian, and obviously he was paying them very, very good money for providing information, and they were obviously lying, because they gave the information that was saying that Ukrainians will welcome Russians here, and it was completely untrue. The second thing is, look, what we saw here in many villages and towns, Russians were stealing toilets. Like, they live in such a poverty that I will repeat that. What we saw here, that Russians were stealing toilets. It means that they live in such a poverty that they do not probably have any other opportunities than just to go to the army to get some payment and maybe some career opportunities. So they agree to kill, for money. And this is nothing, with the civilization or with the society. They were stealing here the kettles, electrical kettles without stands, because they did not know how to use them. The washing machines, because they cannot afford ones. So this is not the motivation to die, to be frank. This is not the motivation to turn into a beast, to torture, to rape, and everything that they were doing. And Ukrainians know that in 31 years, of independence, we passed such a crucially important and difficult way to democracy, but now we see how much we achieved, and we appreciate this very much. So the motivation level of two armies is very, very different. And of course, Putin could not know that.
He didn't know that. And if his people knew it, they were not telling him. That's part of the problem. And even the farm equipment he stole, they couldn't use because it had shut-off valves. And it's just amazing how everything is a disaster. I think we kind of got, I wanted to get into the book originally, but I wanted to say one thing because, we have exciting news you wanted to share. When I think about the Ukraine, I think about the Lays of Ancient Rome, the poem by Macaulay, outspake brave Horatius, captain of the gate, to every man upon this earth, death comes sooner or late. What better way for man to die than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temple of his gods? And I think of the Ukrainians and that say they're at the gate. You know, they're saying you can try to come through, but you're not going to get through. And we're prepared to give our lives to die. And there was a colleague of mine in St. Louis who's Ukrainian who we did some work together. He wasn't a lawyer, but he went to fight in the Ukraine and was assassinated by a Chechen sniper. So there are a lot of people going. I've seen a lot of people in Mexico City, for example. I've seen marches, Mexican Ukrainians protesting before the Russian embassy, marching every day down the Reforma. So this has, I think this more than anything has captured multiple generations, and we're all saying this can't be happened. This is truly the threat to democracy at this point, you know.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So Ukraine nowadays has turned into a frontier, if I may say, and I'm sure this is the word that is clear, you know, in this symbolism and philosophy for many people around the world. And it's a frontier between the values of the past, the values of those people who believe that they need to behave as if, you know, terrible invaders, as if it's like the World War II, and return all the horrors from the past, like genocidal practices and famine and blackmail, and between the world of values where the human rights mean a lot, where people want to be free, where people belong actually equally to the free world and can die for democracy, as you say. You're right with everything, and I'm very grateful how you understand the things that are happening, because it's very meaningful for me, especially today.
Well, I've been following it closely. I think it's, you know, a war on the Ukraine is a war on everybody, I think, in this sense, you know, because where else, how far would the Russians go, you know, once they get past the Ukraine, you know, what else would they do? And somebody who is crazy, you know, they can, you know, who knows where they'll go next? Who knows if they'll launch nuclear weapons? I mean, who knows
Absolutely
what they will do? And that's why I think everybody is afraid of that. And I think maybe one of the reasons why Putin was afraid of NATO and all these countries joining NATO is because he's afraid to be trapped in a corner also.
But look, even if he started this war trying to pretend that he didn't want Ukraine to be in NATO, though Ukraine could not be in NATO in the recent years. Right now, Ukraine has more chances to be in NATO after the war started than before the war. But what actually Putin achieved is expansion of NATO, for the reason that Finland and Sweden had this fast-track application, and they are gonna be accepted into NATO countries. So if he wanted to stop NATO expansion, he achieved absolutely different vice versa way of the developments in geopolitics.
It was the opposite effect, right? It was the opposite effect. Instead of scaring people, they all rallied behind the Ukraine. But let's go back a little bit to you and I met in Las Vegas, okay, where I have your book here, The Fight for Our Lives. You were the former press secretary to Vladimir Zelenskyy. And it's interesting. Can you tell our viewers how you got that position? It was a competitive position, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so when Volodymyr Zelenskyy came to power in 2019, he was so super popular, like literally a rock star. And of course, there were so many people who wanted to have any position in his team. But he became the first president to open transparent competitions for many top political positions. I'm sorry, do you hear me? I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm sorry. So yeah, so he opened this top political positions, and including his press secretary. When he announced, there were thousands of applicants, and I applied because my friends were encouraging me to do. I did not believe there will be a transparent competition. But in fact, an entire company contacted me. I had different levels of competition. And then at the very end, I came to the office of the president to be interviewed by Zelenskyy himself. There, I learned that there were, imagine, around 4,000 of applicants for this position. This is like the biggest competition I've ever won. So I came to the office, and there was the team of the president who tried to play media sharks if they were asking me different hard questions as if I were already press secretary. The president came in the jeans suit, very relaxed. He was enjoying himself. I was for the first time in such an office of the office of the president. So I was answering a lot of questions. And then he asked me the question of my motivation for this job. And I improvised. I said, look, if you, a person from a very modest background, from some province of Ukraine, even without political background, and in democratic way, you could become the president of Ukraine, then if I, a journalist from a poor background, from different region, in transparent way can become your press secretary, what is it if not a Ukrainian dream? Because then it means that anyone can achieve whatever he or she wants and dreams about. I'm explaining in detail this competition in my book, The Fight of Our Lives, that was out just in September. And I think that answer made Volodymyr Zelenskyy hire me because he understood that we had the same vision of Ukraine's future.
Well, and now at a young age, right? You are the press secretary to the president in the middle of a war. And I think, honestly, it was valuable to have a young person in that position because President Zelenskyy is very media savvy. He knows how to communicate. And there are multiple generations in Ukraine that also need to be communicated to also.
Well, I was there at the very beginning when President Zelenskyy turned actually into a politician. Let me remind to people that he didn't have any political experience. He comes from entertainment business. He used to be a comedian, and I guess this one was one of the reasons why actually Ukraine was underestimated, because Russian propaganda was playing this card that we are led by a comedian, you know, so like people were thinking that he doesn't have capacities to lead the country in war. But let me say that when I started working for him, I understood immediately that he is absolutely different from his image on the stage. We always forget that he is a lawyer by background with the special focus on constitution, and that he has done something really very important. He has built a huge business in post-Soviet country. It's a very challenging thing to do. Russia was penetrating our information space for years and years. Russia was penetrating our entertainment business. And in fact, there were years when Russia was actually making the rules on Ukrainian market. Even when Zelenskyy decided to make his business in Ukraine, Russia banned his performances in Ukraine, a big thing, right? And I think at that moment, he personally made decision to stay in Ukraine, not to go to Moscow, not to develop career in Moscow. And since then, probably the separation of identities, his own, identity and Russian identity started. It was early 2000s. And then, of course, it was developing toward Ukrainian identity. But believe me, to make a business of such a scale in post-Soviet country in Ukraine was an enormously challenging thing. And if you are not a leader, you cannot do this. So he's a serious person. He is a lawyer. He's a businessman, and he acts differently in life than how we see him on the screens.
And what's funny is that he actually played in a comedy. I was watching some of it on Netflix in preparation for our interview. He played somebody pretending to be being the president, and who would have thought that he would then become the president? Why do you?
I will tell you
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I will tell you a secret that we've learned just like a year ago, that actually Zelenskyy wanted to apply to run for the office in 2014. And
Oh,
then
wow.
then he took the application back. I guess he just did not feel that he was prepared enough. And in these 5 years between 2014 and 2019, when he announced running and had very short, brilliantly successful campaign, he prepared a lot of PR product also, including the story of a Ukrainian school teacher who by accident won the presidential race, which is
Yeah.
like a fairy tale story, right? And it was really absolutely funny. But through this fun, he tried to show to the people how he imagined the fairy tale of Ukraine, the Ukrainian dream.
We have a question that says, do you feel there is a generalized hatred for Ukrainian people from the general Russian population? If so, what could motivate or fuel it?
Well, thank you a lot for this question. Yeah, it's a difficult one. First of all, let me say, yes, we see a lot of hatred from Russians. We know Russian here in Ukraine, so we can follow them. They are bloggers, they are journalists, just ordinary people who can go online and post videos and photos. And we see that there is a huge aggression and huge hatred. And we know that it has been developed for purpose, and the purpose was propaganda. Russian propaganda works so well that we can say that Russia is a golden champion of lies. And they were developing this propaganda in a very aggressive way. And the closer it was to the war, the bigger and the more aggressive propaganda was. They were trying to present us as an aggressor. But let me say that Ukraine has never attacked any country, and we are on our territory, and Russian soldiers are here too. It's very difficult because when we think about the future of two nations who used to have families together, who used to live for over 70 years together, it is very hard to imagine when will come that moment when we will be able to talk to each other without, not paying attention to those traumas that happened to us during the war. Let me just say you one small thing, which is very important. We've heard from American general that the estimated number of civilians who were killed in Ukraine is 40,000 of people. And of Ukrainian soldiers, around 100,000 of people. These are numbers that really unbelievable for us right now.
And how many Russian casualties were there?
He said that approximately the same number of Russian soldiers, like 100,000 and 100,000, but let me say about millions of destroyed faiths. Millions of people turned into refugees, millions, so many people, dozens of thousands have wounds, and they, have absolutely different fates right now and have lost like beloved ones. So this is like a societal destruction in many ways, and this trauma will live for years and years through generations.
In the beginning of your book, you talk about the Russian propaganda that you've been fighting that for a long time. How do you combat the Russian propaganda? I know we in the US, I don't think we figured it out yet, okay? But what did the Ukraine do? What did Ukraine do to fight the Russian propaganda?
Russians are so good in propaganda and lies. They're like super great in propaganda and lies. Yes, they have developed a very good infrastructure in the internet and in traditional media, where so many people work in Goebbels style. So what they do, they repeat the lies for many, many times. And it's just the matter of how many times you repeat, because if you say something stupid for once or for 10 times, people will not believe you. But if you repeat it for 10,000 times, and if there will be like more profiles to repeat the same thing, people in mass start believing even the most ridiculous things. I was attacked personally for so many times, starting from the fact that there was the lies that for the first my salary, I bought some luxury car, or that I was pregnant, by president's kid, or many different things that destroyed my image completely. And if you go online, you will find Iuliia Mendel that I do not know absolutely. But there is no other way to combat this propaganda in the environment that we exist, to be frank, because the world is not adapted. It's not really, it cannot defend itself from the influence of technologies and social media, unfortunately. New York Times once said a very important thing, that you can fight the lies and propaganda only by repeating the truth as many times as lies was repeated. So the more there is lies, the more you should repeat the truth, but it doesn't work like that. Let me say that the truth usually is so boring and so complex, while the lies is like a wow effect. It's so easy, it's so attractive, it's so emotional, and usually in social media, it is shared much more, 6-7 times more than the truth. So Ukraine did really very difficult political decisions to fight Russian propaganda, and some of them were against the freedom of speech, but they really saved us. So President Zelenskyy, though he was very underestimated, made this very hard political decision to shut down 3 pro-Russian television channels. They were owned by a very close ally of Putin, Putin baptized his daughter, so that you understand the level of connection. And he owned these 3 channels, and he turned them fully into Russian propaganda and lies. And there was no way to influence that, because they were not interested in journalism, in objectiveness, in any kind of balance of facts or anything. They were just creating the lies. That was a very difficult decision, but let me say that the European Union accepted that decision. The second thing, what we were doing, we were trying to, again, develop the network of people who will say the facts. And that was very important thing, because right now we see that a lot of people from abroad and in Ukraine, they understand that they are responsible for the information hygiene of the society. And if they see that there are bots or trolls who share the lies, they go and they comment, or they block, or they complain, showing that there is something very important there, which is dangerous. The information can be also dangerous. And let me say about some latest development. It's called NAFO tendency. You can find it on Twitter, and it was started by, I think, by Americans. It's shared by people across the world. These are people who put a very cute dog on their profile, and they go and they ridicule Russian propaganda. So if Russian propaganda says something absurd, they make it even more absurd, and in such way it's fun and people join and fight Russian propaganda. So this work showed very important thing, that the truth really saves lives, and that's why the truth became so important and valuable. And it's the easiest way to fight this Russian war against democracy, to become a warrior of truth. So people go online and try to fight this Russian propaganda these days.
You bring up a very important point, because even in the United States, as you say, the truth can be boring. But these outrageous lies, like the InfoWars guy, he wouldn't even deserve to mention his name, but who was saying Sandy Hook was a hoax and whatever. People seem to have a tendency to want to believe those things that are outrageous. But you said, I think you put in really good perspective, the truth seems to be boring. But, and I think people are just recently learning and developing a technique for fighting propaganda. My mother always said, if you fight in public, they don't know who the fool is. Okay. No one cares who started. They're just 2 idiots fighting. Okay. So you have to somehow take the high road. So how do you take the high road without looking like the person you're trying to, battle, who's spreading these lies, It's almost like the bully that he pushes you and then he gets a reaction and then you react. And to me, and not being a journalist, the way to do it is not to react, is to go with a planned set of execution with the truth in various selected formats. And people will ultimately see through the lie. At least that's my feeling. That's my non-journalistic approach to this thing. I don't know what your thought is on that.
It's very good, and your mother is obviously a very wise female. Yes, of course, psychology plays a lot of huge role in this. And let me say that humor is also an important instrument here. Let me just tell you one thing, how Zelenskyy could change the attitude and could show that we are different. Like Russians are very aggressive. They really shout all the time, threat people. They say, they bully people on their TV, social media. They are really behaving aggressively. And so they send missiles, and one of the missiles fell in the yard of the house of Volodymyr Zelenskyy, like the part of the missile, the shrapnel. So he just gave that photo to his person from his team, and the person shared it on Twitter saying they've missed it. So like, that was a joke, you've missed now. Okay, like imagine so that it can be a big deal because he's the president of the country. So in any country, it would be a big deal, right? Like, come on, they're shelling the capital of the country and the shrapnels fall on the house of the president, right? Like, what if, someone of his family would be there? What if somebody dies? What if he dies? I mean, this is great. This is a war crime. He's like, they've missed. Right, they've missed, like, and that totally changes the approach, and that's how Ukrainians are showing ourselves and joining these information forces, trying to show that we are different, we are not aggressive. Though believe me, we have the right for the hatred, and we have the right for being aggressive. But we really try to calm down our emotions and to have some discussion which would have some meaningful discussion to show the world that we are different. And one Yale professor told me a funny comparison for herself. I would not think about this. And she said, when you look at Russians who shout and, really behave aggressively on TV, and then you go online and see Ukrainian dog patron, because we have a dog who just helps to demine the territories. And this dog is making yoga there. It's absolutely different, opposite way of communication. And you perceive the people differently. But if you save even the dogs from occupation, and then you can turn a dog into a symbol of communication, and then this dog can make yoga, you show yourself really as open-minded people, and you're not focused only on bullying someone or offending someone. And this is a big difference between Russians and Ukrainians.
I think it does change the focus, as you say. Rather than going with the back and forth with the hostile comments both ways, I think the Ukrainians have taken the high road with that. I think, in my mind, Vladimir Putin's worst nightmare is Vladimir Zelenskyy.
By the way, in July 2019, the New York Times was the first media outlet to write a big article saying that Zelenskyy could be the threat to Putin, for the reason that Zelenskyy was very attractive and that he was known in post-Soviet space. And people really loved him. He was the star. And so he comes as the president, and Putin could be, really feeling uncomfortable with that, because Putin is used to the fact that he is a beloved politician. So that was maybe the first birdie. And I know that, there can be this personal attitude where Putin have some fears about someone who could be more attractive in politics in post-Soviet space.
Well, but the big difference, in my mind, the big difference between Putin and Zelenskyy is that Putin is feared. He'll go in and take over a factory and says, it's mine now. He'll send his people out to be poisoned. Zelensky's loved and he's respected. Big difference. And it goes to show that Zelensky style leadership is more unifying than instilling fear in people. And that's what's happening. We had an actor who was president, Ronald Reagan. And his famous movie was Bedtime for Bonzo, was a movie with apes. Yet he was, I think, I'm a strong Democrat. Okay. So those of you who are Republicans, please don't sign off. But I think Ronald Reagan, as a Republican, was one of the best presidents we had. And he was an actor. So is a tendency that comedians and actors make good presidents? I'm being kind of tongue in cheek here, but that's what it seems like. You've got an actor rising to the cause, being a thorn in Putin's side and uniting the Ukrainian people. It's incredible. It's an incredible story, I think. What do you think about what's the mood of the people now in the Ukraine 8 months into it? I mean, are you seeing a lot of discouragement, or are you seeing...
Sorry, the connection is dropping, so
No, I understand that we may have issues with the connection. Can you hear me now? I know you're frozen a little bit, but if you can hear me, we can still continue. Are you there? Can you hear me, Iuliia? It's okay. We can take a moment to pause. Anyone has any questions for Iuliia when she gets back on? Her book is The Fight of Our Lives. You can buy it on Kindle by Iuliia Mendel. It's a great book. I suggest you read it. We'll see if she can get back on. There you are. You there?
I'm sorry. Something was
no
wrong
problem.
with the connection. Yeah, but I heard.
When you got bumped off, I was pushing your book. So I was telling everybody that they could buy your book. Okay. It's on Amazon, right? I think.
Yes, it's on Amazon. Yes. The Fight of Our Lives. Yes.
So go to Amazon. I have to say, you're an incredible writer, because I couldn't put the book down.
Oh my God, that's the story of my country. We've done a lot.
Yeah, you definitely wrote that book from your heart. But go ahead, you were going to finish. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. You asked a very intriguing questions, but I would not generalize, because many Americans who tell me that you've also got a president who comes from the movie, from the entertainment business, and they do not mean Reagan. They usually mean the president that was before Mr. Biden. And they do not think that this was the best version of presidents in the United States. Though for me,
okay, but let me take issue with that. Okay, Ronald Reagan was an actor. Okay, our prior president was nothing more than a reality TV star, which is not an actor. Okay, that's a difference. But it's a good point. Your point is well taken.
But that's about maybe being a professional in acting. So I would not generalize. I'm sure that this depends on the personality and on the conditions, but definitely people who can act well and who are professionals in acting, they can talk to people's hearts and minds, and that's what appreciated really. So Zelenskyy really did a big thing. He united the Ukrainians and the whole world, and his appeals, they were so important, and they showed what Ukrainians were feeling and passing through. But let me say, if he left the country, no address would be that meaningful. So the most important thing that he did, he stayed here under the threat of his life, under the threat of his family's life, and he, showed with his sample that we are gonna give a battle to Russians. We're gonna stand here till we die.
Well, we've got a question here. With so many people trying to get funds and donations for Ukraine, are there any official donation efforts for those that would like to support the Ukrainian government? I know that Mila Kunis set up a fund. They raised $30 million, but if you can provide some websites, for example, legitimate websites, where people who are listening can donate, that would be helpful. We'll definitely post it and get it going.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm just opening the thing. Where I would donate and why I was donating many times, this is the site of National Bank of Ukraine, because in spring they started collecting money for both, for humanitarian help and for the army of Ukraine, so that you can, donate whatever you want. And they provide the donations for the army to the general staff and to the National Guard and to the security service, and humanitarian aid to those agencies that take care about the people in the occupation and those who suffer, and to the ministries, So for me, they are very reliable source. This is National Bank of Ukraine, and there is English version. If you go there, you can find support the armed forces of Ukraine, it's just the major web page, support the armed forces of Ukraine, people affected by Russia's aggressions. Yeah, exactly. So there are 2 buttons here. You can choose whatever you want. National Bank of Ukraine, it's bank.gov.ua. And I think this is very reliable. This is not private. This is important one, governmental level. Nobody can go there or, put their hand there. So for me, this is an important source.
We have one question. It's a rather philosophical question. What would be the principal message that you would like to send to the world around this conflict? What's the one message you want to send?
Stand with us united until our victory. Because if we finish, the support of the West right now, Ukrainians will not cope alone. And we just need to get it to the end where Russia gets out of Ukraine and when Russia is held accountable. We just need to finish this process so that this Russian beast is stopped and Russia does not attack anyone else. Russia does not recharge and go again into battle. We understand the fatigue. We understand that everybody is tired, but we are dying here, to finish this. And we really beg to stay united and to stand with us. We really understand 80% of Ukrainians voted that they understand that they won't be able to cope without the Western support. We have good people here, but we don't have any supplies, weapons, all the aid that was coming. We are very grateful. So we ask to stand united and to wait more until we kick out Russians from Ukraine.
And I would encourage people who are listening, people who are on Zoom and people who are on my LinkedIn profile, just do something. I think the war against the Ukraine is a war against all of us, and it's a war against democracy. So whatever anybody can do, and a number of my friends are supporting families. One of my friends in St. Louis is trying to get a generator to a Ukrainian family.
Thank you.
There's a kid who works for my company whose uncle owns a camp housing children. Now they're housing a number of refugees. Camp Canaan, I think, is the name. He's related to a lawyer who's actually on my floor. And so we've done some efforts there. So I think I would challenge everybody to do something, even if it's a little bit of money, even if it's $5 or anything you can do, even if it's spreading the word, I think do it, because I think, honestly, this isn't something that's just isolated to the Ukraine. This will spread like a cancer. This will spread like a cancer. And if we don't stop it with the Ukraine, I view, like back to Macaulay Culkin, I view Ukraine as the gate. Russians penetrate the gate, it's going to go to other places. His treachery knows no bounds. That's something out of a movie. His treachery knows no bound. One question that people have asked me to talk to you about is, I get up in the morning, I go to work, I do things, but now you get up in the morning and there's a war. Okay.
That's better now, but yeah, it was very bad. Yeah, right. Yeah.
How is your day? How is your day to day? I mean, you get up and you don't know if a bomb's going to hit down the street. You're constantly on alert. Can you just kind of describe a simple day for the average Ukrainian now? They don't know if they're going to have water, they're going to have electricity.
The simple day, and there is nothing average, there is nothing simple, and there is no system at all. Because every day you can expect, we've got through missiles and bombs going to Kiev, to all over Ukraine. We've got through fuel crisis when we didn't have fuel. Sorry, do you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So there is nothing simple. There is nothing average, and there is nothing systematic here. We don't plan anymore because we don't know what to expect tomorrow. Sometimes Putin fires kamikaze drones and missiles here, so we can wake up to the explosion of to the sound of explosions, and it can happen everywhere. The last time when he was shelling, it was in the very center of the city. My cousin was driving a cab 400 meters from the place where the kamikaze drone fell down, and the next one fell down into the playground, which is absolutely crazy. Second thing, we had past different crises. One of them was a fuel crisis when we could not drive anywhere. There was no fuel, simply no fuel. Like literally we couldn't get, because Russians bombed the supplies and they bombed the warehouses. So there were a lot of cars and people were just like walking, you know. Now we have another crisis, and it's like electricity crisis, because Putin bombed the electricity facilities. So sometimes sitting here in Kiev, I stay without electricity, without water, because I live on the 15th floor and the water is not pumped out, and without heating also, because we just don't have enough gas here. But it was much worse at the very beginning, because at the very beginning, when everything started, we had all the groceries shut down. We didn't have where to buy food. We were not even thinking about clothes or anything like this. That was unnecessary. But the banking system didn't work, so we could not pay with the card, you know. So it was like crazy, and there were huge lines here all over the country. People who were saving, you know, themselves and their families, their kids, their dogs and cats, you know, driving somewhere to the west. There are a lot of buildings that are damaged. These are residential houses, people's apartments and houses. A lot of schools don't work anymore because we are afraid that Putin can shut down some school. Children study online. This is also difficult with the hospitals. Imagine that people need to have operation or to deliver a kid, and there is a siren. So like pregnant women need to go downstairs without light into a bomb shelter. So if you come to Kiev, probably at the very beginning, you will see this is just a city. When you start living here, understanding that every next hour a new challenge can come, and that all your life is built under some survival rules, then you will understand that the war is seen and felt here in the rear the same well as it felt on the front.
It's almost like
certain, but it's much worse in the villages.
It's certain uncertainty. It is certain uncertainty.
Absolutely. Russia occupied 20% of our land at the very beginning. Now it's much less. But like I had relatives who lived under occupation. Imagine Russian tanks stopping in your garden, and they say that they came here to liberate you with a tank. Or imagine that there is a missile just above your house, and there is shrapnel falling down. My aunt, she had a student who died in her kitchen because a shrapnel just got into the window and killed her in a second. She even did not understand what was happening there. So it was just the life, you know, a balance between life and death. So yeah, it's a terrible experience, and now I want that all the wars ever finish and never start again. But what is our concern? That we are afraid that Russians will make some kind of a trap in Kherson, and maybe, you know, they are bragging with these nuclear muscles. So we are really afraid if they would like to use some tactical, you know, nuclear, just to show the world, you know, that they can be a bad guy again and a strong guy again. The war is not over. Yeah.
We have a question. We see on American TV all the demolition, death, and sadness in your country. What is the overall morale of your citizens? We do rejoice in your victories, though. That's the
thank you so much. Look, we were the poorest country in Europe. We know what is poverty, and we know what is to stay without light and water. We used to live so after the collapse of the USSR in 90s, and that was a dark period of time. And that was very depressive because we did not know the reason, because there was Russian blackmail, poverty after the collapse of the empire, etc., etc. Now we understand it's the war. We understand that we can win. We understand that we are strong, and we understand that the world is with us. So I'm talking to people, and they are really, they are feeling strong. Like, I was talking to so many moms here. We have moms with kids. My best friend delivered a month ago. They stay in Ukraine. They don't want to leave. And we believe that sometimes, the victory will come, and this victory will not be in years and years, maybe in few months. So we're very hopeful, and we have high morale. Though I cannot say that war is not exhausting. It is exhausting in physical way.
Well, this war has definitely unified the Ukrainian people. It took an outside force, I guess, to maybe stop a lot of the infighting, whatever. But let's assume the war ends tomorrow. Do you see the Ukrainians remaining unified, learning from this experience with the war that we need to really stick together to be a powerful country, or to be prosperous?
This war. That's such a smart question, to be frank. We see that this war, it destroyed the artificial things in our society, and it provided us the essence of our identity as we have never felt before. And we understand that we are very strong, united. So, there are always problems in every society around the world. There is no society without problems. But I believe that we will have much more unity and appreciation of ourselves and of our identity, as well as a huge gratitude to the world after the war, because we understood that we are, in the same place, and we passed such an important existential challenge.
One philosophical question for you, because this is a very emotional interview for me, because I just, I connected with the Ukraine. I've been to the Ukraine.
Yeah, I remember.
Work with some Ukrainian lawyers, and actually one of them was my first interview. Serge Grishko. He worked for a law firm that I used, and he's still practicing law in the war. I mean, it's like some business has to continue. But the one question I have for you, what gives you courage and what gives you hope? What is the one thing that you wake up every day and you say, I have hope and I have courage?
Do you hear me?
I hear you now, yes.
I want to hug my mom. I have not heard from her for days, and I have not seen her for many months. And I don't know what will happen to her in the nearest future, but I want to hug her very much.
That's the hope that you have. What is it that gives you courage? What is it that keeps you going to keep fighting?
I so much believe in my people. You cannot imagine how great they are right now. They are so brave.
They're fighting.
They're so inspiring. My people, they are even females, in the rare, like we are, well, almost every of us has just joined in a volunteer. We just united to give this battle for our lives, because this is the battle for our lives. And when I see these people who are so kind and attentive to each other right now, and who understand the struggle, and who do everything and sacrifice their lives, for this country to exist, I feel like there is so much. There is the history and the future, the traditions and the innovation, the new generation, open-minded, and the old one, the different identities, races, and religions, and all of us are standing for one thing, for Ukraine to exist. And this inspires us very much, me personally.
And I think that's probably the hope of everyone in the Ukraine. They want to hug the person they love,
Yeah.
They have pride for their country, and they want to be free. That to me seems to be, the message And I think the world gets that message. And that's why I think you have so many people who are just, we have an American expression. I have to be careful when I use these American expressions, but they have to jump on, everyone has to jump on the bandwagon, you know, everyone has to jump on the wagon, you know, and people are jumping on the wagon. What I'd like to do, we're going to, and thank you so much for doing the interview. This is Conversations with Rudy Rivera. I went onto my LinkedIn channel, and it's on my YouTube, and I've got some guests on Zoom. Thank everyone for joining. Please subscribe. What I'm going to do is turn off the recording right now. And there's something called like after hours, you know, with some of these shows. And there are some people that we have on the guest. So if you still have time, I know you're busy, but if we can just take a few minutes, I can allow some of these to talk and come in, and we can have maybe a 5-minute discussion. I think it's really important that people get to know you. And none of these people will probably be in a position where they can see you like I was fortunate to see you in Las Vegas.
Thank you, Rudy. Just in a few minutes, my husband tells me that we will have a blackout.
Oh, that's okay. We'll go as long as we, okay. So let me just start. To anyone who doesn't want to participate, you can bump off, but I'm going to.
We really have a few minutes, so let's do it, because I remember it was original.
Yeah, so I'm going to allow everyone who wants to talk to talk. They can come in and
thank you for all the questions. I mean, there are a lot of questions, and supportive and philosophical, and I see them. Thank you for all of them. I mean, I'm really glad that, you know, it shows some engagement and that you care and that you know the story. So I'm very grateful for
well,
that.
we do know this story and we're following. Does anyone have any questions for her? Where this is like Bill Maher after hours, okay?
Okay, Lee, you are unmuted.
Oh, well, yeah, Iuliia, I am amazed by you and the strength of your people. We see what's going on the news, not quite as much as earlier in the year because we have so much stuff going on here, but we see women in the factories. We've seen the grandmothers in the street making Molotov cocktails, and it is simply amazing and awesome. Good for you. And with you, your country and people are incredible, just incredible.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I mean, this has been really informative, and good luck and God bless you and your people.
Thank you. Anyone else like to say hello? Marcella, you have your hand up.
Rudy, do you hear?
Yes. My admiration and respect to you and your people. And I want